Well, let's start with a very straightforward question for Dr. Fauci and all the people who act like he's some kind of a pandemic hero, like he's the guy who's known all along what we have to do. Just listen to Fauci and it all gets better. Let's start with this question. When do we never have to hear from him ever again? That's what I would want to know. When will he just go away and or go back to being the old bureaucrat who will say things like wash your hands, mitigate, take mitigation measures? When do we get to hear that about the flu, not about COVID? Because that's what this guy did for like the last 20 years or so. A lot of talk about the flu from him in the media. Once a year, some local news outfit would put out a story about, Dr. Fauci, who's the director of the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Disease. This guy is a middling bureaucrat at best, and he has been given more power and unaccountable power at that than honestly any federal government employee in my lifetime. I can't think of anybody else who's been able to tell you have to strap cloth over your face. You have to restrict your breathing indoors, outdoors, because he says so. And what makes it worse is that the whole time there's this pretense that it's not really his decision. It's the politicians, the policy makers. They're the ones that are actually making it. No, that's not really true, because they point at Fauci and say it's the science, the experts. I'm just following the science. And the scientists say, I'm just letting the politicians know. You see the game? Nobody's accountable then. Nobody actually has to answer any real questions about this. They just tell you, shut up and do what you're told. They've been telling us that for a year. I am honestly appalled at how much the American people have gone along with this nonsense. I'm not saying it's all nonsense, okay? I've got a vaccine appointment. I know that COVID's real. I just had it. Like, when I say nonsense, I'm talking about masking up outside. I'm talking about masking up between bites. I'm talking about telling us to forget that for the last 100 years, it never occurred to anybody to think that it was some great public health measure to wear a mask all the time during respiratory virus season to save lots and lots of lives. Right? That somehow we just magically stumbled upon this. Oh, and it's not because there was a revelation or some scientific advance about all of it. No. It was a little over a year ago now that people went into a panic, and like some kind of emotional security blanket, all of a sudden, the one thing they thought they could do that would save them was masking, because social distancing is preposterous. It's just basically avoid human beings as much as you can. That's what the real guidance is. Avoid being close to people, which obviously does not work as a policy. Avoiding people as a matter of science, yeah, of course. If you don't see anybody, you're not going to get a transmissible aerosolized virus from them. But we've been dragged through madness here. They just clarified the CDC guidance on getting it from surfaces. And one of the problems is that, yeah, theoretically, a lot of things are possible, but you never worry about it. You certainly don't base policy on it. Right? Theoretically, we could be invaded by Norway next week. You can't tell me that can't happen. But we don't sit around worried about that. We don't spend a lot of time and resources concerned about that. But look at the way they even talk about surfaces and transmission of COVID on surfaces. Now they're saying it's really, really, really unlikely. It's like a 1 in 10,000 shot you're going to get it from. And you can't even really come up with numbers for this, because what does that even mean? If you're near somebody who has COVID, it's a 1 in 10,000 chance you'll get it from a surface. But the point is, in the early days of this, people were wiping down their groceries with Lysol. The food they were eating, they were worried about. There were all these panic porn stories about how frozen food shipped from China has, COVID on it or something. It was all nonsense. Total nonsense. But oh no, now they really know what to do. Now they really know. And look, I don't rehash the past of the pandemic here just as some kind of catharsis, although it is fun to point out what a clown Fauci has been and how wrong he's been. I actually do it because I want people to understand that they need this grip that the Fauciites have over their minds to release, because they're not going to just let it go. They're not going to say, you know what, you're right. We've made a lot of poor decisions here. We're going to allow human beings to just make their own determinations. They won't do it. When do we get to go back to normal? Now, this is going to be a big debate. This is going to be a big fight because their version of normal will be mostly allowed to do things that you used to do before the pandemic, but you're going to have to get a booster vaccine every year, and you're going to have to await the public health measures that we come up with every year during flu season to prevent flu and COVID. And if we see a spike, there's going to be more shutdowns and lockdowns. And their version of normal is that you get a little bit of your freedom back over time, but they can always still take it away from you. They don't want to accept that this was an entirely aberrant emergency session the last 12 months that we should all just completely reject going forward as a means of living our lives. They have not reached that point yet. And they can't even justify what's been done up to this point. They don't even have answers. You want receipts, so to speak? You want me to prove what I mean by this? Dr. Fauci was asked on Morning Joe, which what do you have to know about Morning Joe other than that's one of the favorite Fauciite hangouts? It's for people who are so smart. Remember Morning Joe himself last week going on some tirade like a lunatic about how all the stupid Trumpers won't get vaccines and fine, you're a moron, I'll go to a game. Really? Do you actually ever read anything, Joe Scarper? The answer is no. The guy's a buffoon. It's embarrassing. To know where the most vaccine hesitancy actually is, it's not Trump supporters. Not Trump supporters, Joe Scarborough, you scum. But still, it was fun to go on that angry rant, self-righteousness. Yeah, and having Mika go, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Mika's just there. Oh my gosh. Another case of nepotism. Anyway, Fauci was asked on that show about ignoring his advice on masks and social distancing in Texas and how Texas is doing great, actually. Doing great. Here's the Fauci answer. Play 2.
Yeah, it can be confusing because you may see a lag and a delay because often you have to wait a few weeks before you see the effect of what you're doing right now. There are a lot of things that go into that. I mean, when you say that they've had a lot of activity on the outside, like ball games, I'm not really quite sure. It could be they're doing things outdoors. It's very difficult to just one-on-one compare that. You just have to see in the long range. I hope they continue to tick down. If they do, that would be great. But there's always the concern when you pull back on methods, particularly things like indoor dining and bars that are crowded, you can see a delay and then all of a sudden tick right back up. We've been fooled before by situations where people begin to open up, nothing happens, and then all of a sudden, several weeks later, things start exploding on you. So we got to be careful we don't prematurely judge that.
Premature? You can't judge it premature. It's been 4 weeks, Fauci. It's been 4 weeks already, buddy. Going on week 5 here. Really? This is the equivalent. Fauci is the epidemiological equivalent of a guy who tells you every day that stock is going to go down, that stock is going to go down, and it keeps going up and up and up. And then eventually, after saying every day for a month or 2 months, that stock's going down, it does actually go down because that's just what happens. And he goes, see, I told you, it's because of the public health measures. This guy is atrocious. But people are so intellectually insecure. They attach themselves to him, and they can't fathom for a second, wow, maybe he really doesn't know very much. Maybe he isn't some policy epidemiology god who is leading us down the right path this whole time. Maybe, in fact, if we have allowed for more state and local improvisation without the entirety of the Democrat Party and the corporate media terrifying everybody and leveraging this for political gain, we could have seen what actually works and what doesn't. In fact, there's been some of that, as you know, with Florida and a few other states that refuse to go along with the panic. But what does it look like? I mean, they did this last June in states like New York, where I am, so I was paying close attention to it. They said, here's what we need for different phases of reopen, right? What does that look like nationally? They won't tell us. Why not? They say that this is all about the numbers. This is all about the science. How come they can't explain to us what does it look like? Is it cases at zero? Because that's insane. But that's kind of the level they're setting us up for here, that they'll keep doing stuff. They'll keep harassing and annoying everybody under the promise that they're saving so many lives. Right? We have more than 500,000 people have died from COVID, but Fauci wants you to believe that the mitigation measures have been really successful. So we need to keep them in place. God forbid we lose those mitigation measures because the virus would spread and some people would die from it. Wait a second. That's already been happening all the time for the last year. And I know they'd say, well, it would be so much worse. Really? Look at the numbers. At least 30% of the country's been exposed to this and had it even without knowing it, based on the serology testing and a simple extrapolation of how many people have been infected nationwide for cases that we catch versus cases that are actually proven. Do you think that these people that are showing up, like Michael Osterholm and Dr. Fauci and Scott Gottlieb and these people you keep seeing on TV, that they're all of a sudden really, really smart and wise and make great decisions? These people are feckless bureaucrats, always have been. You know, it's like James Comey is in charge of national health and therefore economic policy. But everyone goes, well, he was FBI director. Yeah, we all know how that went. But they don't even force Fauci to answer the real questions, do they? Occasionally he gets asked something and then he just babbles. What was his answer? I played it for you a minute ago. You know, it could be up, down, left, right, a few weeks. What could happen is there could be a plateau and the plateau could go up. Or a plateau is flat, like a pancake, and it could stay there for a while. Or maybe the pancake gets a little fluffy, it gets bigger. Then you got a big plateau. I don't know. Hey, Team Buck, thank you so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you like this video, please click that little thumbs up button so then it will log as liked. And also, if you want to see more great content from The First, please click subscribe.